Welcome to the neighborhood of Astoria, a neighborhood in Queens which has become one of the largest Middle Eastern and Mediterranean enclaves in the city. Astoria is bordered by the East River, with a history of being a suburban escape for Manhattanites. It rose to fame when the Steinway family moved their piano factory from Lexington Avenue in Manhattan to Astoria, encouraging all the workers to purchase the lands around the village, which gave birth to the foundations of Astoria. Hi, I'm Jose, and I'm in the neighborhood of Astoria, Queens, the trendy and exuberant neighborhood that mixes culture, entertainment, and manufacturing. On this tour, we'll take a ride on the Astoria Ferry and travel along the East River, capturing all the amazing views of New York City skyline. We'll explore the neighborhood and its fascinating treasures, from museums to movie studios, parks with stunning backdrops, and businesses that transport us to other continents. The neighborhood is a contemporary gem that represents the best of Queens. So let's go on tour and experience the neighborhood of Astoria. One of the best ways to experience New York City skyline is by ferry. The city has the largest passenger fleet in America, with 6 ferries that stop at 25 piers across the 5 boroughs. Our journey begins with one of the newest ferry routes in the city, the Astoria Ferry, which Mayor Bill de Blasio debuted in 2017. As we enter the ferry, we're surrounded by giant panoramic windows to get the full vista of New York City. And I take a seat near the back of the ferry to prepare for this fascinating ride. The New York City Ferry along Astoria has 7 stops, beginning on East 90th Street, Queens, and ending in Pier 11 by Wall Street, Manhattan. A 50-minute ferry ride that passes by some of New York's most iconic bridges. And we set off on this amazing excursion. The New York City Ferry has 38 vessels that follow 6 routes across the city, a convenient way of travel for city residents who can transfer to other routes for no additional cost. Looking out the window, I see one of Queens' most iconic bridges, the Queensboro Bridge, one of the few bridges in the city that doesn't require a toll. From this amazing view, the bridge towers over the East River and casts a giant shadow for ships passing below. But once we step out into the light, we're greeted with the famed New York City skyline. From our window, we see the iconic skyscrapers, which become their own character to New York's tourism, containing more than 6,000 high-rise buildings, like the Chrysler Building or the One Vanderbilt Tower. But our journey takes us past the Brooklyn Bridge, one of the most famous bridges in the world, where the ferry ends by Pier 11 and begins our round trip back to Astoria. For such a low fare, under $10, you get the stunning view of Manhattan and its famous bridges. You can't beat the price. Let's step out onto the observation deck to get the grandeur experience of New York City, where I'm left in awe by the beautiful scenery. And our ferry jets past the Brooklyn and Manhattan Bridge. Fellow tourists join us on the deck, taking photos of the towering buildings of Lower Manhattan as our ship bounces between the boroughs. The East River separates Brooklyn and Queens from Manhattan and the Bronx, is called a river, but technically it's an estuary that connects the upper New York Bay with the Long Island Sound. The excursion passes below the Williamsburg Bridge, one of the famed bridges in Brooklyn. The bridge held the world title of longest suspension bridge back in 1903, where vehicles crossed between Williamsburg, Brooklyn to Manhattan's Lower East Side. A busy traffic route taking us past the United States Coast Guard and the safety zone created along the East River, where the ferry emerges to the views of the Empire State Building. The ferry stops at other notable Queens neighborhoods like Long Island City, the bordering neighborhood to Astoria, containing a giant billboard of Pepsi Cola. The Pepsi billboard is an old reminder of the industrial history found on the east side of Queens. We see our captain navigating the vessel towards the Queensboro Bridge as our ferry leaves its mark on the waters of the East River. I stand on the main deck, just enjoying the views of the city and thinking about the history of the New York City Ferry. This system was relaunched in 2016, operating separately from the famous Staten Island Ferry and New York City Waterway. During the 1900s, New York City contained as many as 147 boats, transporting residents between the boroughs. But Park Commissioner Robert Moses tore down many of those ferry lines in favor of vehicular transit. And almost a century after being torn down, we experienced the rebirth of New York City's forgotten means of travel. Let's make our way back to Astoria. Astoria is the neighborhood in Queens that sits between the Robert Kennedy Bridge and the Queensboro Bridge. It has one of the oldest histories in New York City. It was once a village that belonged to Long Island City before being integrated into the greater New York. Astoria got its name when it was dedicated to John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest man in America during the 1800s and the first multimillionaire. Prior to Astor, it was originally called Hallett's Cove after the first landowner in Astoria, William Hallett. The name change came as a result of trying to lure John Astor to invest in the area, similar to his investments in Manhattan. Astoria became a leisurely playground to get away from the city, as wealthy residents built mansions in the neighborhood. Its real prominence came when Henry Steinway moved to Astoria, building the famous piano company, streetcars, and a sawmill. Today, Astoria has become a multicultural fusion of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern residents, with New York having the second largest Greek population outside of Greece. Like many early immigrants, Manhattan was a starting point to America, and the surrounding boroughs were undeveloped areas that could be molded to feel like you were back in the old country. The fascinating neighborhood of Astoria has contained one of the most interesting history in Queens, whose identity is defined by its landmarks, like the Hell's Gate Bridge, a railroad bridge that was once the world's longest steel arch bridge, simplifying freight transportation for the Pennsylvania Railroad, connecting New York to New England. A prominent factor to the city's economy, the bridge became part of a plot by Nazi Germany to destroy it during World War II. One of the many targets foiled by the FBI following the attacks of Pearl Harbor. Astoria's addition of bridges like the Robert Kennedy Bridge opened a new door for its growing economy and expanded its connection to the affluent New Yorkers of Manhattan, who built properties along 12th and 14th Street, becoming Astoria Village, which was later incorporated to Long Island City in 1870. Long Island City was an independent industrial city and the seat of Queens County. It represented 7 other neighborhoods, including Steinway and the Ditmars area. The East River remained an active body of transportation, where the original Astoria Ferry transported livestock, timber, and firewood from its current place in Hallett's Cove to 86th Street in Manhattan. In those days, they were steamboats that even extended to Flushing, Queens. So much unknown history surrounding this walking path as I find myself strolling past a living museum. The park sits below the Robert Kennedy Bridge, formerly Triborough Bridge, which ushered in the automotive era of Astoria and ended the need for passenger ships. As I walk towards Astoria Park, I can feel the vibration of cars and the changing winds of the neighborhood. This is Astoria Park, where we see all the active Astoria residents engaging in countless recreational activities, taking full advantage of the running track and large soccer field. Opened in 1913 and comprised of close to 60 acres of land, this park came into existence following the growing calls from the new Manhattan and Long Island City residents that settled in Astoria. We get a glimpse of the frenzied soccer game, part of the many active events happening on this winter morning. The park contains the largest and oldest public pool in New York City, used to trial swimmers during the 1935 United States Olympics, placing Astoria Park as the largest park along the East River. The neighborhood of Astoria was a darling in the film industry and a mecca of film production during the silent film era. It's the birthplace of Paramount Pictures and continues to be a popular location for filmmakers. This museum plays a beautiful homage to that history. Welcome to the Hollywood of yesteryear, Astoria, Queens, the filmmaking capital of the silent era. Let's explore Astoria Studios in the Museum of the Moving Image, a museum dedicated to preserving the history of film. As we enter the museum, we're greeted by the story of cinema and the tools used to create moving pictures. Devices like the Edison kinetoscope or Lumiere's cinematograph. Those early films projected images from lanterns, and as cinema evolved, the production became larger and more sophisticated, with rapid advancements in camera technology. Astoria, Queens became the central place of filmmaking in the early 1900s, producing hundreds of silent films within the area. The East Coast film industry flourished and crowned Astoria as their jewel of filmmaking, with Edison's camera inventions in the neighboring state of New Jersey, followed by the famed New York City Theater District. Many creatives came to the city to explore this new developing medium. The Museum of the Moving Image opened in 1988 and is located in one of the 13 buildings that made up the Astoria Studios complex. It's the only museum in America dedicated to the study of television, film, and digital media. And the beautiful relics of the past take us through a time machine of tools that have given life to our imaginations. The crowd gathers around all the fascinating cameras and films, while I find myself studying the early days of movement, which looks so simple in our digital age, but was a crafty technique of multiple slides in rotation. In the early days of film, the cinematograph, introduced by Auguste and Louis Lumière, projected 16 frames per second, which gave the audience the illusion of movement. The crowds were spellbound by the majestic and astonishing achievement, which laid the groundwork for the next evolution, introducing sound. The museum showcases the variety of microphones used throughout the history of cinema. Kaufman Studios continues to be a player in the filmmaking industry, with award-winning movies like Armageddon Time and Chop Shop. But one of the most popular exhibits throughout the museum is the life's work of Jim Henson, an unforgettable wing of memorable creations. Sesame Street is filmed in Astoria Studios, and the Jim Henson Workshop is located by the borders of the neighborhood, making this museum the ideal home for the exhibit. From the Muppets to the Fraggles, visitors get a fascinating look at the genius of children's entertainment. Coining the term Muppet, Jim Henson gave us memorable characters in the fusion of marionettes and puppetry. His biggest success came in the form of humanoid animals found on Sesame Street, which achieved international fame. And crowds gather in the museum to relive their childhood and look back at memories of learning from the characters on the workshop. Walking through secret hallways leads us to a theater which showcases the amazing behind-the-scenes work of Henson and his team. From one form of illusion, we travel to our next venue of magic, the introduction of makeup in film. It gave a new element to character transformation, playing with the belief of the audience. In the case of Linda Blair in The Exorcist, the audience fainted and even vomited when seeing the realism from her demonic possession. Makeup, as well as computer-generated imagery, gave a modern audience new heroes to cheer for. And as we close the tour of the museum, we come across a fascinating set model of the Queensboro Bridge from the film Turk 182. This model celebrated 75 years of the bridge, now nearing its 115th anniversary as a pillar to Queens. The first big ethnic community that made Astoria their home were immigrants from Greece. In the 1900s, the neighborhood was known as Little Greece, and this park became Athens Park, dedicated to the Greek capital. In the early 1990s, the area's population began seeing a rise in residents from the Middle East, specifically from Egypt. It became a popular shopping district for Middle Eastern residents, to the point that the demographics shifted and Steinway would be known as Little Egypt. Queens, New York City, the borough called the most ethnically diverse place on earth, which is home to hundreds of languages and nationalities. Astoria is a cultural meeting point of Mediterranean and Middle Eastern residents, and making your way to Steinway Street will bring a fascinating enchantment and wonder. From the stunning Al Iman Mosque, which begins the street called Little Egypt, to the many customers ordering from delicious halal food carts, the neighborhood thrives with businesses from the Arabic world. New York City has the third highest concentration of residents from Arab descent, with Queens being one of the largest enclaves in the country. And many businesses, like Sands of Persia, an Iranian eatery that caters to the very unique percentage of the community, bring that unique feeling of home. Shops and customs from all types of country, from Yemen to Palestine, can be found in Astoria. Elements of Egypt are scattered all over the neighborhood, like the famed Mambar, a restaurant named after one of the most popular dishes in Egypt, Syria, Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. The Middle Eastern and North African community settled in the neighborhood in the early 1970s and quickly stamped their mark on the growing portfolio of this amazing neighborhood. A feeling of being in Manhattan without the expense and frustrating busyness found in the city. During the peak of the Greek community, Astoria saw a population of more than 70,000 Greeks who created schools, places of worship, and businesses. New York City became the second largest community of Greek descendants, right behind Melbourne, Australia. And the 2020s have seen a resurgence in Greek population, where the community makes up 10% of all Astoria residents. This beautiful mural on Steinway represents the mixture of cultures that have transformed the neighborhood. Dubbed the Greektown of America, Astoria is a place where you might hear Arabic or Greek freely being spoken throughout its streets. Greek flags hang off of residential homes, and walking through the neighborhood showcases businesses in traditional blue and white color, the reshaping aesthetics of the flag and old country blending with the concrete jungle. New York City is an encyclopedia when it comes to telling the story of immigrants in America, and is a reminder of old country identity meshing with American culture. The above-ground subway brings you back to the Empire State. This outdoor art exhibit is called Sculpture Park, created in the 1980s by artist Mark Di Subero. The magic of creating art is using the imagination to turn nothing into something. Subero specialized in abstract expressionism. This park used to be a landfill that was repurposed by local artists. And art has been an important attribute of Astoria. As we enter Sculpture Park, we can reflect on the carousel of identities that define the neighborhood. From the industrial growth to its history in filmmaking and impact of so many immigrant cultures, the influences that shaped Astoria can be captured in this vibrant outdoor setting. And as I find myself walking through the sculpture of hay, I'm left completely enthralled by the experience of this little big city. And as visitors converse about the expressionist exhibits, we can break down their complexity, which is similar to Astoria, a neighborhood originally meant to be an escape from Manhattanites that grew into a cosmopolitan mixture of culture, people, and businesses, cementing its own identity in the story of America, reaching people worldwide, from between the confines of the Robert Kennedy Bridge and the Queensboro Bridge, a treasure within the borough of Queens. The village of Astoria is truly a remarkable journey through America's industrial age, bringing together stories of immigrants, landmark businesses, America's elusive film industry, and the development of wealth from New York City's earlier days. It's a neighborhood that brings the exuberance of the big city, mixed with the charm and feel of a small community, while closing off the pages with an international jubilance. I'm Jose, and I thank you for joining me in exploring the neighborhood of Astoria. Until next time.